The purpose of this video is to step through the compositing process. So this can be transferred to Nuke. So let's get started. To begin with, it's a good idea to look at what's coming into Fusion. So let's take a look at that. So now this is Maya. So if we look at what's happening in Maya, we're using the render setup to reinterpret the scene for each element of the entanglement. To show what the elements are, let me first show this image. These are the elements of the entanglement: rings, flecks, ribbons, sparkles, pearl stroke, Keppel stroke, and there are also two additional layers here called puffs pearl and puffs Keppel, that go into making up these elements. So let's go back into Maya, and you'll notice that these render setup layers, these render layer names, correspond to those elements. So we've got the ribbons, sparkles, rings in one direction, rings in the other direction, different colors of stroke, flecks, puffs, and additionally we've got an ambient occlusion and an object ID, and that's because this was a test shot and I needed a plate to composite it against. And the object ID, I'll mention that, or I'll explain that when we get back into the compositor. And then we've got the light rings in both directions, and what these are is shadows cast by a light that are separated in compositing that make up the scene interaction. Now, the way these make it out of Maya is, if we look at render sequence, what we'll do is select the camera, and then this all render enable layers. That means that has these clapboards selected. The ones that have those selected, those will be rendered out. So if this is selected and then hit render sequence, all of these that are selected will be rendered out. Excuse me. They're rendered out and then posted to, let's see, this location on Artella. Files, farming, 40 entanglement, and in entanglement, again you see these same names: flex, ribbon, rings one direction, rings the other direction, sparkles, and so on. So you get the light, this is scene interaction, the object ID. So it goes from Maya, render setup, out of these layers, render sequence, out of there, and then I want to talk just a second about what comes out. So if we look at, let me select a layer here, and you can see how this works. If I select, let's see, this one. Okay, now you see that we've got a location where these are going to be rendered out to, and I want to show you the format here. They come out as EXR zips, 16-bit half. So these are raw files, and what that means is they come out linear as EXR files, and we've got a view transform in the scene here of sRGB. So if we go back to Nuke, or to Fusion, what I have here in these viewers is I've got a buffer LUT enabled, and it's also sRGB. So these come into these loaders. So if we look at this loader, here is the tool coming in. Well, we don't even need to show that, but just know that they come in with no curve applied in the loader and no curve removed. just linear. And then what we're seeing here in the viewport is a view transform of sRGB. So nothing odd about that, just standard workflow. Also, I want to mention that they come in, like I mentioned with Maya, they come in, they exit Maya at 16-bit half, but the format is changed here to default, and the default is, for this project configured is to float 32. So I increase the latitude here inside Fusion, just enough to do the work, the math, and then it's then actually it leaves here at float 32, and then gets encoded in Resolve to something else, or it should be encoded to whatever you use for encoding. So let's see, I think we're out of Maya. Let me just check to make sure that I haven't missed anything. I think that's what I want to show it, but I'm going to hop around because I get nervous in these videos, and I'll just hop around if I think of something I forgot. So I want to step through this, and I'm going to try to touch each node of each branch because, and I want to move the toolbar over here, so if there is anything that there are any tweaks made on these, that a screen grab can be made or just noted, and then they can be transferred to new. So for example, I want to touch color correction, so you can see that there's a gain adjustment here, a little bit of a gamma adjustment. So we'll just start at the beginning here and step through. Now there's really two beginnings here because it's composited over a plate since this is a test shot. So if we look at the plate here, which is just an ambient occlusion render of the scene, which I mentioned in Maya earlier. And whenever I did this, when you do an ambient occlusion render or any render that requires a beauty pass, you can add an object ID material to the scene, override it, and you get a material, you get object ID for free that comes along, or it's extremely inexpensive, so it really doesn't matter. So if you look at that coming in, here is the object ID pass, which means that makes it easy to add a chroma key to select these and create masks that can be used, in this case, just for constraining the entanglement to the area between the two characters. If this turns out not to be a viable option for all shots, we can make adjustments later. So if we move through, I don't think there's anything to see on that. Trim settings, and just talking about trim for a minute. What happens in Maya is that there's a 100 frame run-up. Let me just go back to Maya and check and talk about that for a second. There's a 100 frame run-up. In this shot, the shot sequence is from 101 to 245, and so I go minus 16 for the 100 frames. 100 frames in front is minus 16, and then I set the number renumbering from 1. I start the numbering on the output EXR sequences at 1. So that's the and then notice back in Fusion that none of those first 100 frames are rendered in Fusion. Those are ignored. Notice down here in the bottom left corner, this render range starts at 101. Okay, so we're back here now. So it comes in the chroma key. It selects these. The colors are selected. This constrains the. Notice on the right here, I'll use the ribbon as an example. I'll take this out, this pass, and it's going to have to re-render that. But you'll see without the mask, the ribbon and the rest of the other elements of the entanglement extend into the character. So put that back in. And then in order to maintain that, to avoid any surface or any penetration or overlap of the arm, there's this garbage mat that was added. just to move the mat along the character's arm. Let's see, I'll bring this over just in case there's something that needs to be grabbed from this. I don't think there is, but there could be. Okay, so we've got our masks, and those masks go into all of the loaders. And so let's take a look at the first one. So here's the ribbon. Ribbon comes in, and it's going to be the same on each of these loaders. It's going to be the same trim settings and global range in settings for each of these. Oh, I want to mention something here so it doesn't get lost, because this is some potential for confusion. The two stroke loaders are only loading the alpha. They could load the RGB channels, but there's nothing there. The only thing the only thing used for compositing is the alpha channel. So I'll get back to that when we step through this, but I just want to mention that before it gets lost. So here we are back at ribbon. So the first thing that happens after the ribbon is loaded is it goes through a color corrector. A couple of tweaks made here. Gamma and gain. Let's see. And then we go into exponential blur. And for transferring exponential blur to nuke, if you look at the tools here for blur, or exponential glow, I should say, we've got glow and soft glow. These are not as pretty as exponential glow. So whatever, nuke probably has an exponential glow in it, but this is actually the more expensive glow, but it's also the better looking glow, so I choose to use it. And the settings here are right here shown in the toolbar. So then we get to the first node that is orange, and that's special because notice on this gain and gamma, these are colored because they are driven by a probe. So let me talk about that for a second here. If we go to this part of the scene, remember this is the plate coming in, which is the AO pass rendered out of Maya. This goes in two directions. The first one, it goes into a resize node. I do that just to make this blur less expensive because it's going to be a big blur coming on the next node. So I reduced the resolution of the image down to 128 by 72. Something because all I'm wanting to do here is find out the mean luminance of this scene. So I'm just getting rid of all of the low frequency stuff. And then it's blurred. You'll notice now that almost everything is gone. But what we have here is the luminance is basically broadly the same. And then it goes into a brightness contrast node that I'm calling the probe driver because this actually drives the other probes in the scene. And each of these other probes, they're looking at the luminance level, the luma, of this image coming out of the blur, and then making value adjustments based on the variation. And in this shot, from beginning to end, there's almost no variation in the value in the mean value of the luminance. But in other shots, there's a lot, and so the entanglement will be composited over a wide variety of backgrounds. And so the probe probes the background and then sets all of these other nodes according to how bright it is. So if we look here, go back to ribbon, if we look to brightness, this is coming out of this blur here, it's coming out of here. And we see that it has the gain and gamma driven by these by the two probes. And the way I've named the probes is 1 to 0.85 and 1 to 2.8. Now there's a number of these probes, and if we look at each of these, here's 1 to 1.5, 0.5 to 1. We'll get to this stuff later, but I just want to show that there's a number of these probes, a number of these ranges that needed to be configured to drive the entanglement RGB and alpha values to maintain an appealing look across various brightnesses. So let's go now through the next one, which is flex. So we're back over here, and flex comes in. Let me give it the reference image. That's this one. Comes in with these two colors, and this is just sprites. It's not sprite sequences. Most of these others are sprite sequences. So now we go to, we load the flex, come in from there, we go to color corrector. Oh, here we go. And we've got a small gain adjust, a small gamma adjust, go into a similar situation on exponential glow. Brightness contrast, again, this is driven according to background, according to these probes. And then this is merged with the two, and you can see the result over here on the right. So stepping down, next we have sparkles, and these are image sequences of particles that were generated in Fusion, but in another, anyway, they're just image sequences. And again with the exponential glow, and then a color corrector. So let's look at that. Exponential glow is this must be a keyframe. I want to power through this. I don't want to get stopped because of everything, but I've noticed that I've got something controlling this, and since it's not a probe modifier, it's a keyframe. I'll check on that and I'll get back with you on that. So don't get bogged down on this. Then we've got color corrector. Here we've got a gain adjustment, and it looks like just a gain adjustment on that. Merge nodes, normal operation, over, complete blend. Let me check this merge node here too. For this is also a blend of 1. If I miss any of these, if I don't mention it explicitly, some of these merges are not 1. Some are less than 1 and also use a different blend mode. So let's keep going here. Sparkles, right. Merge, right. Okay. Next is rings. Okay. Just standard loader like before. Let me just click through here so you can see. Okay. And merged, and then a color corrector on here, which is just a probe, 0.5 to 1, driving a levels adjustment here. And notice here, and I want to really highlight this so it doesn't get lost, is that this is only adjusting the alpha. There's another brightness contrast node in sequence that doesn't adjust the alpha, because the RGB and the alpha require very different consideration in this case. So if we go back to this, we've got a probe on levels, and the modifier is 0.5 to 1, and then if we go into the RGBA, it's another brightness contrast tool. I'm just pointing up here to show that alpha is not selected. And then we've got probes on gain and levels here, 0.5 to 1 and 1 to 1.5. And step through here. And you notice that whenever we're looking at these, it looks pretty bad over here oftentimes on these things. And that's just the way it is, because what we're seeing here is something very different than what's going to be rendered, because we've got our display here that's not, I set this to normalize, and you can see that it changes quite a bit. So let's turn that off and keep going. So next we've got our puffs, which is more sprite sequences. And so they come in, we've got a Parl version and a different Keppel version. And then nothing you need to see there, I don't think. But then the brightness contrast, we've got a gamma adjust. It looks like I've got another keyframe on this. So anytime I keyframe this, since this is something I did and I don't recall it right now, I'm just going to come back to that. So let's keep going. But notice that I've got a gamma adjustment here, and I'm modifying that for some reason. Let's keep going. Let's see if I do it over here too. No, I don't do it on this one. So I needed to make an adjustment there, and it needed to be varied throughout the brightness. And you know that's going to happen. So let's keep going. So on this one, we've got the post-pearl. It had a brightness contrast with a gamma adjust. We've got post-keppel here. It's got a color correction node, no adjustments, and so this is just a null. But I often will add a color correction node because that's just out of habit. So it doesn't do anything, so just ignore that one. And into a merge node here, and the blend mode is normal with a full blend, and then we go into a brightness contrast node with only a modifier on the levels, 0.5 to 1, and this is on the alpha, and then a brightness contrast on the RGB, and it has 4 modifiers on gain, gamma, saturation, and levels, and this is those. These are the ranges for those. So notice it's probe driver driving these probes. I didn't mention that before. Okay, so we keep going. Stroke. Stroke comes in, remember, just an alpha, and then the alpha goes to a background node, and the background is where it gets its color. So we've got the pearl color here. It comes. This is one of the only, I think the only, no, the stroke and the light rings, the light interaction, gets their color in compositing. They come out of Maya as neutral. So it then goes to a brightness contrast, which is a tweak on the gain, tweak on the gamma. Nothing unusual about that. And then again we go into this deal where make an alpha adjustment with a gamma tweak, and then a levels modification that varies throughout the shot with the probe modifier 0.5 to 1. And next in this branch is a brightness contrast RGB. These probes, these modifications made throughout the shot. There's only 3 here, but I'm showing 4. So again, it looks like I've keyframed something here, and like I said, I'm going to get back with you on that. So just ignore that. But there are 3 probe modifications here and 1 keyframe. I can probably figure out which one I see. Remove. No, they're okay. Actually, see, I can do remove 1.5. So 2 of these are using the same probe. So 2 of these are using the same range. So you've got these 3 ranges. One of them used twice. So that's that mystery explained. Down to this one. Oops. Let me put that back because I like having that out. I've got, let's see if it's the exact same situation. Now on this one, these are very different colors, so it's no surprise that they would have different settings. So let's hope I didn't just go through that in case I didn't miss one. Okay, now then these are merged. Let's check this merge. It is a screen merge, and notice the blend here. It's this value here a little over half, and notice that there's nothing's connected to this, so it doesn't change throughout the scene. And I just want to mention here that on these tweaks between on these different color correctors and brightness contrast nodes, they haven't changed over various shots. So once these get dialed in and new, you should be able to just leave them. That's been my experience with it. So once you get it dialed in, it should be fine. Okay, and then after this we've got a blur, just a small blur. Let's look at that, see what it does. Just kind of softens it up a little bit, take the edges off. And then a merge, and this is normal, and this is 0.5, so let's look at that, because it merges the puffs over the strokes. Before we go full on these down the chain here, let's look at when the light comes in. So the light scene interaction, and notice on that, this is, if you'll notice down here along his feet, back here, the idea is that this entanglement is emitting light into the scene, and it's a hack. What I did in Maya is cast. In two of the layers, I turned these rings into particles, just spherical particles, and then cast. So they are opaque, and then used the light to cast shadows into the scene, and then those shadows are red. So in Maya, the particles cast red shadows into the scene, and those come in. Now back down here on the bottom left, those come in. You can just see those little tiny red dots in the scene, and then those. Here's the other one. So we've got two sets of red dots here that are coming from those particles, and then those are merged together here and multiply with a full blend. There's anything special about this other than the notice multiply to combine the two. And then a chroma key is added here to pull those dots out by color. So it's set to red. Here are the values here. Of course, in Nuke, that's going to be all different probably, since those are generated automatically just by touching the dots. So it goes from the chroma key, and then a background node is used to give them their color. So now this is the color of those dots. They are the same color used by the rings layer. And then a defocus is added to restore their shape. Notice these rings are 5-sided objects. The defocus now has its lens size set to 5, and it adds 5 sides to these. And notice the settings on this defocus node, and you'll notice that it's pretty heavy here. There's quite a bit of opacity on these, and that's because it takes a lot, because there's a lot of it. Whenever these are composite over a bright background, it just takes a lot. So the next step is glow, and I used a fast glow here because it really didn't matter. And so this is the light in the scene, and then this is merged together. And now before I show that, let's step through these merges as they come together. So we get the strokes and the puffs and the rings, and then a combination of the flex and the ribbon. So everything's together here, and then we merge the lighting down along the bottom here, and then into this is an exponential glow that has a modifier. Let's see if it's a probe. Yeah, it's a probe, 0 to 1. So it dials this in black. It doesn't have any effect, and then but it needs more as the scene gets brighter. And then we go here. Let's see if I missed anything. This is normal. Okay, I did. This merge node is blended at 0.75. So this is not a full blend in blending in these lights. I quote lights. They're not actual lights. And then we get to, here's the plate again. The plate goes into a color corrector just to bring it down a little bit. And color corrector is just a gamma adjustment here. Of course, on it, when we're compositing over a plate, that's just going to be different for every shot, so that doesn't really matter. And then finally, on our final merge, it is a normal and a 1, complete blend. And then it goes to the saver node. And the saver node, it goes out as linear and a full 32, and then this is encoded to whatever it needs to be. Right now I'm using Resolve, but Resolve has some downsides. With it's UHD and below only, so that's a problem there. So I'm probably forgetting a bunch of stuff here, and like I said, anywhere I've keyframed something that I didn't know, I'm going to post some additional material on that. But this is basically what I wanted to show. This is the step through of the compositing process. Hopefully this will get the transfer into Nuke started, give us a starting point to talk about, and then if there are any questions, let me know. Thanks a lot.